In GA4, it brings two worlds colliding together. It brings the app analytics and the web analytics worlds together. And for the most part, it lives harmoniously together. That means all the data sits together, all of the reporting we do is the same, and actually there's no difference in terms of the data. So we can learn Google Analytics 4 for a website, and then we can go work with an app, and it's exactly the same approach. So once you've learned one, you've learned them all, because all the data exists exactly the same in GA4. The only difference between app data and web data is understanding the attribution, so understanding the source, the medium, the UTM stuff that we do for websites, understanding that for app, and specifically around the first time someone opens the app. Because when you open a website for the very first time, it's actually no different to the 100th time you open a website. You know, you go to the website, hopefully you've clicked a link with some UTMs in there so Google Analytics can recognize the source. And then the code loads and the session starts and all the events that you end up logging just get collected in the same way. With an app though, the first time you open an app is the installation process, which is different to opening an app the second or third time. And so the first time you open an app, you have to go through the App Store or the Play Store, depending on if it's iOS or Android. And then you have to go through that process where there's an opportunity to lose the attribution, to lose and drop off all of those lovely UTMs. And then of course you don't actually have to open the app after you've installed it, right? I can install an app and then not open it for 3 or 4 days or weeks or ever, really. And so this is the hard thing about understanding the user acquisition data or the kind of app install attribution. And specifically hard for iOS right now. And that's because of something called ATT. And by the way, there's lots of acronyms here. I'll define them all in the description. But ATT is App Tracking Transparency, which Apple introduced alongside the rollout of iOS 14.5. And you may have seen this or at least heard of it if you don't have an Apple device. But this is where they introduced the system where they had to get consent, and these pop-ups occurred to provide kind of trackable data to all these app owners, the developers. And most people just said no. I think it was over 90% in a lot of industries just said no. And what that stopped working is the ability to identify what marketing was driving the app installation. And so when you've got an app and you're spending money, or maybe it's not spending money, but you're running campaigns to drive app installs, you want to know, did my campaign drive app installations? And that weirdly is a very hard question to answer, and now something that's almost impossible to do on iOS. And now Apple has introduced a system called SKAdNetwork, and this is SKAN for short, another acronym. And Apple can do this for you. So Apple can identify the source of the installs. They can tell you which campaigns, which sources, which marketing is effective at driving installs. But you have to work with Apple's SKAN. And that in itself is a pain. And Google Analytics 4 does not do that out of the box. Or actually, it doesn't do it at all. And this is where you have to work with something called an MMP. And this is a mobile measurement partner. And this is where they come into play. So this is a second platform that you have to install in your app. Yes, you need devs to implement this, but this will identify all of the app installations back to sort of campaigns that are driving them. And this is the only way to get this data. Now, this doesn't work, or is not necessary for Android right now. However, Android and Google are looking at introducing their own version of SKAN down the line. And down the line, Google might support SKAN. They might do this themselves, but at the time of recording, that's not possible. And so Google Analytics 4 cannot accurately report on the attribution side of installations or app installations. So there's a lot going on there. So what I'll do is I'll link off to some great articles. So some MMPs to note. So for example, Adjust, and they've got a really good piece of documentation around what this iOS 14.5 and SKAN actually means and how it works. So I'll link off to that documentation. Another thing I'll link off to is a couple of podcasts that I've done that I co-host. And we brought some clever people, or way cleverer than I on this subject at least, to talk about this subject. So what is the problem with app attribution, and what is SKAN, and what is iOS 14.5 doing with everything? So I've linked off to both of those podcast episodes as well. So if you want to go learn a bit more, definitely more than I can explain in a couple of minutes at least on this video. But the long and short of it is, if you have an app and you are running installation campaigns, so if you're running advertising to drive installs of your app, then you need to be exploring getting yourself an MMP or partnering with an MMP to do the attribution to measure that marketing's effectiveness. If you don't have apps, you don't have to worry about it. If you have apps but you don't care, or you're not running about app install campaigns, then you don't need to worry about this either. If people are installing your app and then all you're doing is sending links to them to kind of open the app and re-engage with them later on, then you don't need to worry about this. This is purely around the app installation process. So that's the hardest thing to do here. All right, well, I'll leave it at that. Lots of information, lots of acronyms, lots of new concepts probably, if you've not come across any of this before. But please don't expect me to be able to explain everything within a couple of minutes, because I'm still understanding it myself. But I'll link off to some great documentation, some great resources for you to be able to explore in a bit more detail. But like I said, if you don't have apps and you're not running ads to drive installs, then you don't have to worry about this, which is quite nice. Last thing is I'll link off to is the announcement that Google's going to be rolling out their own version of SKAN down the line. So the equivalent for iOS is rolling out for Android, and we don't know what that looks like. Again, at the time of recording, I don't know what that looks like, but I'm sure it's going to be something that Google Analytics will be able to support, being a Google product. So fingers crossed. We'll see what happens when that's rolled out. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that's interesting. A lot of information, but interesting nevertheless. And check out the resources for more information. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.